이번에 모실 분은요, 도로테 루시 박사님이신데요. 진짜 긴 시간 기다려 주셨고요. 박사님 제가 또 이틀 전에 배웠는데요. 아까 그 최재현님 대표님이 말씀하신 것처럼 너무 즐겁고 긍정적인 에너지가 너무 가득하셔서 저도 같이 정말 있으면 같이 즐거워지는 그런 에너지를 잔뜩 받았습니다. 오늘 어떤 이야기를 해주실지 너무 궁금해지는데요. 도로테 박사님은 현재 정신건강을 위한 글로벌 컨퍼런스를 통해서 개인의 삶의 질 그리고 조직의 긍정적인 변화를 가져오는 이런 연구와 이런 일들을 지금 소포에서 함께 하고 계십니다. 네, 도로테 박사님 모셔보겠습니다. 네, 박수로 환영해 주세요. 감사합니다.
Okay. All right. So let's see. That was great, wasn't it? Yes. So that leads me right into this conversation piece. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So don't mind me if I start going through slides very quickly. This thought of inquiry. It's a consciousness practice. That's what we just did. And it's asking questions. Instead of saying, here are the answers, you learn to stay and ask the questions. So there's several consciousness theories that I wanted to go into today. And one of them is called objective reduction. And it's really based on this, on watching and paying attention. So in quantum, you have subjective reduction and objective reduction. Objective reduction, something happens, and then you act. So there's research around this, right? So there's your brain knows what you're going to do before you do it. Weird? So there's a movement there, right? We were talking about wind and flow. Well, let's write that. It's wind and flow. So either you're paying attention or you're not. Two choices. So learning to pay attention is incredibly important. And inquiry, what we just did, is exactly that. It is learning to pay attention. The other theory I was going to go into is called integrated information theory, Tononi. And what is special about that is that it says consciousness is integration. So it is bringing things together. So it is learning, inquiry, but nothing happens really in terms of consciousness unless things are integrated. You'll find that in companies too, right? Systems theory. You need things to be integrated. So those were the two that I wanted to go into, or three, really. And then I wanted to tell you a little bit about my life quickly. So I grew up everywhere in the world, constantly moving around. I had a different culture at home than I did. My parents were German, than I did at school. And that kept on going from the age of 4. My parents put me into a French kindergarten and they said, oh, you'll go and you'll figure this out. Like, you know. All right. I eventually did. But needless to say, there's a little bit of trauma there too, right? And so this ability to learn, I had to. I was thrown in the deep end, and I had to. So I would say there was never not transpersonal in my life. Not possible. My family comes from a tradition that is Christian Hermeticism. And so my uncle was very much involved in that. And he was in East Germany. So I also live this divided state, this divided country. I know exactly what you guys are feeling in that sense, right? So I mean, it's not exactly the same thing because you have your history and we had ours. But this state of being ripped apart, of families being ripped apart, of not feeling congruent, right? So this idea then of integrating all that, you start really seeing it as something supremely important. So my uncle was a Catholic priest and he had a radio show in East Germany. Don't ask me how he did that, but he had it for years and years and years. And he taught absolute spirituality, mysticism, without using vocabulary that was too difficult. So he spoke to the people and he helped them deal with a situation of being divided, of having a totalitarian regime, and all that goes with that, right? And also don't forget, there was the war, same thing, like World War II. And so a lot of people carried trauma and history from that. So I grew up coming out of that tradition. Definitely, I didn't know as a little kid that I was really interested in spirituality versus religion. But I started asking all the questions, and my father was useless because he always said, because. That system you were talking about, patriarchy, right? Like, meh. And I was like, I'm a mystic at heart, but I didn't know that, right? So I kept asking the questions, and eventually my uncle would answer those. But in the meantime, I learned Vedic systems. I learned Buddhism. I learned Kabbalah. I learned all these different aspects because we kept on moving. And because I was then in international schools, people were exchanging. This was my area of interest. So I just want to go back to that integrated information theory for a second. The more I was able to integrate this experience and to say, you know what? The transpersonal rocks. Because you can incorporate the individual, the local, and the global. The individual and the group, the society, and transcend and go beyond. And there's nothing better, right? Like to me. So this is my enthusiasm. And we can go back into consciousness theories. We can go back and look at things academically, and we can argue our case, and we can explore more. Let's see. We all agree. This consciousness thing is really difficult, right? Like, are you finding yourself? Like, how are you finding yourself? What's going on? How confusing is it? It's confusing. So we're building the self-awareness. We're building all these things through our understanding, through consciousness. And we are going up and up. We talked about Wilbur a whole lot. Wilbur and his stages of consciousness. Like you can really see yourself evolve if you follow those. Look them up. They're super interesting. It's like the question to you would be, where are you at? Where do you feel you are at? Right? And then you kind of see, it's like, what needs to be integrated? What needs to be integrated to make this a whole system, to make me a whole system, so then I can influence more systems, and then they can also be integrated. So I've been working on really harmonizing these different theories. So the ones I was talking about, OR is objective reduction. IIT, integrated information theory. And then there's also Josipovich, who is one of my professors I really loved. His class is neuroscience, and he's chasing after consciousness as such. So he's looking at brain waves and what happens when people congregate, like we are here together. So we produce a field together, right? So that is special. We also have in transpersonal psychology, we have a term called participatory spirituality. Same type of thing. Right? Except that Josipovich has been looking at, where in the brain is this coming from, right? Precuneus, and he's been chasing this. And now he said his conclusion is that it has to be consciousness as such. So we understand, and everybody's arguing, right? So you have to find out, like, what is your path? Where are you going to go? What do you feel? So this is the subjective reduction, is we collapse the wave by our observation. Quantum. I collapse the wave by my observation. So it means I cause it. And this is accepted, right? So there is Dr. Dan Siegel in interpersonal neurobiology, he talks about this. And this is like, up here, the graph, you can see potentiality, and then you can see like where the wave collapses, and that becomes your reality, and that's the way that goes, that theory. And then we have the objective reduction, which is what I was talking about. That's that open field, and then it is no longer I cause it, it is I notice it. So for you, what is consciousness? Does it come? Do you cause it, or do you observe it? So there's different theories, and I can go on and on about this, but really the bottom line is that there's gravitational pull forces that cause the action to collapse. Again, it's before. So you are left with, do you notice this or do you not notice this? Because it's happening. So there's microtubules that are in the brain, etc. So we can go into that another time. And so it is about support, growth, flourishing, and finding your path, using these methodologies, whatever helps for you. Right? Meantime, the consciousness researchers are all arguing which one is like the right approach, which is not. And it's a glorious conversation because they really love each other, and when they argue, it's kind of sweet. But that leaves us to make our own decision. And again, inquiry is amazing in this way. So we have our students, Costa Mesa. How do you find your way, right? So we study the hero's journey. So these are all things that lead to more consciousness, more and more. And this is where I get excited. I was like, you see somebody having an insight, and it's like, that's what it was. The wave has collapsed. It's awesome. There's also a shot of dopamine that goes through the body, and then people really love that, and they want more. Right? They want more insights, they want more understanding, and it's not about knowledge. Notice, we are learning how to learn, not information. It's not about regurgitating information. It is about knowing, wisdom. As Dr. Humphreys pointed out, that's our name for Sophia, right? So this idea of wisdom brought in, very important. Supremely important, especially in the age of AI. If you're not able to establish a way of critical thinking and decide how you're going to do these things, you're going to believe every last bit of information that comes your way. Not a good thing at the moment, right? Self-leadership. In that moment, so self-awareness, you learn more and more about yourself. And then you make the decisions based on whatever system you want to go into. Maybe you sit with it. Maybe you do dream work. Maybe so many opportunities. So many techniques in the transpersonal. Meditation for decision making. Dr. Zhu was teaching that. That was great. That's exactly it, right? That's self-leadership. Then you can lead others, not before. Because if you do it before, you're just like following some sort of a rule book. I have 55 seconds left. So this is really just interesting because these conversations about AI, quantum computing, and so on, Josipovich says, no way, consciousness is such. You need people to people. It's never going to build without that. So it's a very interesting theory. You can read his paper and decide what you think. Participatory spirituality, same thing. But it is useful, right? As some of you in business know. It's like it's useful. So you can use it for information sorting. That's brilliant. But you need to discern. Here. Discernment, essential skill for the future. Without that, it doesn't work. Critical thinking, that's it. Oh, I'm done. How was that? Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.